Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei become a solar god part 3. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video and also share this video with your friends. I have created my other videos playlist, there you can watch my all videos easily, check out as well. Let's start this video. A middle-aged man with black hair and red eyes crossed his arms, standing on top of the building of Kuo Academy. The fallen angel known as Kakabiel scowled in disgust. The fallen angel harbored a great deal of pride within himself. After all, he was one of the fallen angels who had fought and survived the climatic Great War. Due to that war, Kakabiel believed that the fallen angel race was the superior species. The mere thought of anyone telling him otherwise brought damage to his pride. But years later, a godlike powerful source of energy had risen, and it angered Kakabiel deeply. The one who possessed this power was a target of Azazel, since the laid-back fallen angel had become interested in him. The one who harbored this power was by no means human, Kakabiel could tell that much, and to top it all off, Rainer, a fallen angel herself, was with the boy. Azazel had ordered her to merely watch over the boy, but Kakabiel was disgusted with this procedure. At first Kakabiel would just ignore the boy's godlike power, but soon after, Kakabiel's pride soon began to decline. As the boy grew stronger, so did Kakabiel's paranoia. And then it happened. Kakabiel was one of the observers who had watched a fight between Issei Hyoudou and the third son of the Phoenix clan, Riser Phoenix. Watching the boy transform twice had only increased Kakabiel's fear. However, it appeared luck was on the fallen angel's side. Due to the fact that both Surzik and Riser had agreed on a bet in order to see Issei Hyoudu's true power, there would be a large chance of the boy harboring a great deal of hatred for the devils. While disgusted at the thought of someone like Issei joining the fallen angels, Kakabiel thought it would be beneficial for Issei to join his side. In order to start another great war. Azazel had strongly objected to Kakabiel's desire to start another war, but that only served to increase the latter's desire to go on along with his plan. With Issei's power in his disposal, the devils, angels, and any other species would stand no chance against the fallen angels. But Kakabiel couldn't dwell on that ambition yet. There were other ways he could start another great war, and he had every intention of using the way he had started with. He had already sent that bumbling stray exorcist and the bespectacled priest to steal 3 of the 7 Excaliburs. All Kakabiel himself had to do was steal the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. One of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi was originally called the Aim no Murakumo no Tsurugi, which translated to Sword of the Gathering Clouds of Heaven. Rumors stirred that after the Great War, the bodies of the 2 heavenly dragons, Drake and Albion, were destroyed and their souls were encased. Albion's soul was encased within a sacred gear, Kakabiel already knew that. But Drake, the Red Dragon Emperor, was rumored to be sealed within the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. The Welsh dragon wielded immense strength, possessing enough power to kill gods or satans, and not only that, but the Kusanagi no Tsurugi enabled its wielder to control the wind and cause it to move in the direction of his or her swings. Kakabiel was all too elated to even think clearly. Well, the boy could be used for another situation. With the heavenly dragon, Kakabiel had a great advantage in his favor. The Kusanagi no Tsurugi was sealed within the Ice Grand Shrine, the Shinto shrine dedicated to the Shinto goddess known as Amaterasu Amakami. All Kakabiel had to do was wait. Soon. That power will be mine. Then no one will be able to stop us. 3 days later, at Kuo Academy. Walking into his class, Issei noticed that Yuma Amano was once again absent. Raising an eyebrow, Issei turned to see Shulin sitting at the desk next to his own. As they locked eyes, Shulin quickly looked away. Sighing, Issei walked over to his desk and put his bag down. Looking around his classroom, he noticed that he and Shulin were the only ones in the class so far. Turning to look at Shulin, Issei crossed his arms. Alright. I know you didn't come here just to learn. Shulin locked her eyes into Issei's own, but she remained quiet. What are you doing here, Shulin? Her blue-green eyes appearing saddened momentarily, Shulin sighed and held herself, but the Chinese devil still didn't say anything. Issei raised an eyebrow. Is this about Riser's possessions? If it is, my answer won't change. I want nothing to do with them. But you earned it. I didn't earn anything. Shulin looked away and held herself tighter. The rest of the girls don't know what to do. Without Riser-sama. We're also lost. I think it's quite clear that Riser didn't care that much about you and the rest of his peerage. Shulin widened her eyes and locked them towards Issei's turn orbs of sight. If he really was the kind master you seem so eager to envision him as, he wouldn't have included his peerage into his bet with Surzik and his father. Shulin didn't know what to say. She wanted to deny what this boy said, but as she listened to Issei's words, she realized he was right. Done with the conversation, Issei looked out the window, quietly observing the outside. Shulin stared at Issei for a moment and then she looked away, placing her hands on her desk. 2 hours later at the Grand Shrine of Ice. The Kabiel smirked as he shot another light spear towards the shrine. As he looked around the outside of the shrine dedicated to Amaterasu, he narrowed his eyes. That idiotic priest and that holy sword-obsessed priest should be more than enough to handle those devils at that school of theirs. No doubt, the Archangel Michael has already sent his subordinates to help the devils. How pathetic. Walking inside the shrine, Kabiel began his search. Issei's house. I want pork fried rice. What else? Cookies and donuts. We don't have donuts. I want donuts. I already said we don't have donuts, ma'am. Do you like snakes? Did I say that we didn't have any donuts? Silly me. What kind of donuts did you want? Fortune Cookie Restaurant. The employee hung up the phone and palmed his face. The manager of Fortune Cookie rose an eyebrow as she walked over to the worker. What is it? She asked. It was that same woman. Her voice is so cold and toneless. Every time she calls, something bad always happens. The last time she called and ordered here, another worker here had his car destroyed and he ended up having to take the delivery bike. What is it, boss? This sounds like a challenge. A challenge? Well, yes. Every time this woman calls, you say something bad happens, right? Yeah? Well, then wear this and take this with you. The employee widened his eyes when his boss handed him a 4-leaf clover and snake repellent. Are you sure this is going to work? Have I ever been wrong before? Well, don't answer that. Now hurry up and cook the damn meal. Issei's house. The office maintained her emotionless expression as she watched the clock. 5 minutes have passed. Soon, I shall definitely have free food once more. The door to the house opened, revealing Issei. Rubbing his head, Issei looked up to see Office watching the clock once again. Office, did you call that restaurant again? Setting her dark gray eyes to Issei, Office gave the young man a sly smile. Yes, I did. Issei sighed and palmed his face. Office, if you keep doing things like this, people aren't going to deliver here anymore. What will you do until then? Office already had her answer ready. I will order from another restaurant. But they will still come here. Issei widened his eyes and walked over to the dragon god, sitting next to her. How do you figure that? Office's smile grew into an expression akin to smugness, and she tapped her finger on Issei's forehead. They will challenge me, my Issei. The more times I call, they will answer. Humans are challenging me. That is amusing. Aye. Issei droned as he shook his head. Sighing at the dragon god's troll logic, Issei looked at the living room table and his eyes widened. It was the fortune cookie flyer, but it was turned over. On the back of the flyer was the picture of the Grand Ice Shrine. Office tilted her head at Issei's expression. Issei. What is wrong? Issei picked up the flyer as he looked closely at the shrine. The Grand Ice Shrine. That's the place where my parents found me. I haven't seen this place in years. As he looked at the shrine, Issei gained a thoughtful look on his face. Maybe I should go visit. After all, it is the place where I was born. Plus, I was named after it. I guess there's no shame in going. Sitting up from his spot on the couch, Issei dusted himself off and looked at Office. You want to come with me, Office? Office tilted her head and looked back up at the clock. I shall wait for free food. You can't do this forever, Office. You know you could always just ask me to bring you food. Office gave Issei a sly smile, which seemed to widen. Issei is kind, but free food is much more satisfying. Issei sighed as he rubbed the back of his forehead. There's just no convincing you, is there? No, there is not. Grand Ice Shrine. A pool of solar flares appeared in front of the Grand Ice Shrine, revealing Issei with his eyes closed. Breathing out a sigh, Issei opened his eyes, and he gasped. What on earth? The Grand Ice Shrine was in complete ruins. The structures of the entire floors were torn apart, and the rooms were now turned to ashes. Issei looked on in shock as he walked inside the shrine, looking around his surroundings. What the hell happened here? Whoosh. Issei widened his eyes and quickly avoided a crimson blast of energy that was sent towards his way. Maintaining his balance, Issei looked up to see a man with black hair and 5 pairs of black wings. He also wore a black robe with detailed accessories. Held tight in the man's hands was a sword shaped like calamus and sported a white metallic color. The sword was glowing with a dark crimson hue. So you are the one who defeated the 3rd son of the Phoenix clan. Issei narrowed his eyes on the man. His energy tells me he's not a devil, but that doesn't mean I trust him. Standing up straight with a cold gaze, Issei glared at the man. Were you the one who destroyed parts of the shrine? Fallen Angel Kabiel smirked as he held the sword. So what if I am? This shrine has nothing to do with you. Leave now, boy, and I'll let you live. Do you really think I'll leave just like that? After you destroyed this place? Narrowing his eyes, Issei peered at the sword in Kakabiel's hands. Was that sword part of the shrine? So what if it is? None of that matters now. With this sword, I can. Kakabiel then cut himself off when he suddenly had an idea. An awful idea. He then smiled in a smug way. Listen well, boy, because I will not repeat myself. My name is Kakabiel. I am a fallen angel, and because of this, the enemies of the fallen angels are the devils and the angels. The reason I am telling you all this is because I would like to make a deal with you. Taking Issei's silence as a sign to continue, Kakabiel smirked. I can fully assume that you hold a great deal of hatred for devils due to what the Mayu and the third son of the Phoenix clan have done to you. It seems that we have something in common, Issei Hyoudou. Not unlike yourself, we fallen angels hate the devils with an intense passion. They are not to be trusted. Kakabiel's smirk widened. That is why I am offering you to join me. Together we can decimate every single devil in existence. No other devil shall place harm on you, nor shall they manipulate you for their own selfish desires. Devils are known for their devious and manipulative nature, boy. With your power and the power of the entire fallen angel race combined, no one will be able to stop us. You can have anything you desire. Well, what is your answer, Issei Hyoudou? Issei lowered his head, his hair shadowing his eyes. Kakabiel chuckled inwardly, confident in his persuasion. I refuse. Kakabiel narrowed his eyes. What is the meaning of this, boy? You're actually right about two things, Kakabiel. Yes, I distrust the devils. Yes, they are devious, but aren't fallen angels just the same? How dare you, you little brat. Issei narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth. That's the reason they fell from heaven, right? Because they had impure thoughts. If you really think about it, in a way, devils and fallen angels share a lot of similarities. They are deceitful, devious, and neither of their thoughts are exactly pure. You bashing the devils makes you sort of like a hypocrite, Kakabiel. Kakabiel's eyes twitched as he struggled to contain his temper. How dare you say those words? With a snarl, Kakabiel swung the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, and out of the sword, a crimson wave of energy collided towards Issei, who quickly got out of the way. Narrowing his eyes, Issei got back up. That sword is no joke. I've got to be careful. Issei's hair and skin started to glow with an orange-yellow color. His brown orange-yellow eyes losing their pupils and eyes, Issei looked up at Kakabiel and disappeared from the fallen angel's sight. Kakabiel widened his eyes and held his guard. Issei, in his super solar form, suddenly appeared in front of him and raised his fist back. Kakabiel smirked and impaled Issei with the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, prompting Issei to widen his eyes and cough out blood. Kakabiel cackled as the Kusanagi no Tsurugi started to glow with a crimson color. How pathetic. You may have bested Riser Phoenix, but you underestimated me, Issei Hyoudou. Now rot in hell. After saying that, Kakabiel dug the sword deeper into Issei's stomach and a crimson blast completely swallowed the young man in a pool of energy. The crimson light faded, revealing nothingness. Smirking widely, Kakabiel stepped back, but then stopped as he felt something on his shoulder. You missed it. His red eyes widening in horror, Kakabiel turned around to attack with the Kusanagi no Tsurugi until he felt something grab his arm and something else put pressure on his knee, causing it to jut backwards. Kakabiel's bone from his leg jutted out more, causing a large pool of blood to pour out from his leg. Screaming in great pain, Kakabiel looked up to see Issei staring down at him with a fierce glare. You. Techmate, fallen angel Kakabiel. Issei snarled as he lifted the fallen angel up. Narrowing his eyes, Kakabiel summoned a light spear the size of Kuo Academy itself and impaled Issei with it. Or he would have, had not Issei summoned a solar shield to absorb the colossal light spear. Kakabiel widened his eyes in horror and in his shock, he dropped the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. Like I said. That's my checkmate, Kakabiel. Rearing his fist back, Issei charged a great amount of solar energy as a result from Kakabiel's light spear and pierced the fallen angel in his stomach. I don't like being manipulated, Kakabiel. I thought you would have learned that already when you saw my battle with Riser Phoenix. He did the same thing, and look what happened to him. Holding the fallen angel with only one hand, Issei glared darkly at Kakabiel. Issei Hyoudou. At the call of his name, Issei turned around and looked up to see a young man with dark silver hair and light blue eyes. Sensing his energy, Issei narrowed his eyes. Another devil. What's he doing here? Volley Lucifer flew down towards Issei and Kakabiel, his eyes widening a little at the bloodied fallen angel and the golden aura surrounding Issei. Covering his interest with a confident smirk, Volley pointed to Issei. I believe I need that fallen angel you have trapped in your hand. Narrowing his eyes further, Issei looked over at Kakabiel, who shuddered at the young man's dark gaze. Suddenly Issei lifted his hand to the side and sent it towards Kakabiel's midsection. Volley widened his eyes once more as he witnessed Kakabiel's bisection. And they say I'm a battle maniac. As his body fell apart, Kakabiel started to lose his voice as a result of his screaming. Looking over to Volley, Issei held up the fallen angel's upper body. "Which half did you want?" Issei asked quietly. For once feeling a little hesitant, Volley walked over to Issei and picked Kakabiel up by the hair. As he looked into Issei's clear eyes, Volley felt a chill go up his spine. Backing away from Issei, Volley revealed his demonic wings and flew up into the air, flying away from the ice shrine. After standing for a few moments, Issei powered down to his normal state and sighed. As he looked around the shrine, Issei looked down to see the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. Narrowing his eyes, Issei bent down and looked at the sword more closely. Hesitating, he went to touch it and then his eyes widened as he felt darkness claim him. Issei's inner world subconscious. Issei opened his eyes and shook his head. His sight clearing, Issei widened his eyes in amazement. Where the hell am I? In front of him were a multitude of buildings and skyscrapers. The setting in front of him seemed to have the appearance of a virtual world. What is this place? It's about time you found the damn sword. Partner. His eyes widening in shock at the sudden voice, Issei turned around and immediately after doing so, he took a step back. It was a lean-built and stoic middle-aged man with pale skin, green eyes, and long ragged crimson hair. He was also clad in a crimson-black overcoat that flared out from behind him. Issei took another step back. In the man's hand was the Kusanagi no Tsurugi sword itself. Staring down at Issei, the man pointed the sword at him. "Are you ready, partner? Cause if you're not, there's a chance you might die here." Issei blinked repeatedly in confusion, and then he looked down to see that he suddenly had another version of the Kusanagi no Tsurugi as well. Widening his eyes, Issei pointed to the young man. "Hey. Where did you get the Kusanagi no Tsurugi?" The man narrowed his eyes. "You'll have to be more specific. When you talk about the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, do you mean the one you're holding in your hand? Or is it mine?" Issei got into a defensive stance, not knowing what was about to happen to him. "Who the hell are you?" Taking advantage of Issei's shock, the man soared towards Issei in a burst of speed. Frowning darkly at Issei's surprised look, the man reared his sword back and he spoke with a fierce tone. "You want to know who I am, partner? Well, here's your answer. I am." Outside Issei's house. Liko sighed as she walked to her cousin's house door. On a whim, she wanted to see how her cousin was doing. Even though it had only been a couple of days since the cousins had last seen each other, Liko couldn't help but worry for her cousin. "I wonder how Isatoko is doing." Sighing, Liko brushed her dark silver hair back and lifted her hand up to knock on the door. Knock knock. Liko waited for a response. Raising an eyebrow, Liko knocked on the door again. Knock knock. Once again no response. Her interest piqued, Liko went to open the door and looked into her cousin's house. Looking inside, her crimson eyes widened at the first thing she saw. It was a beautiful young woman who appeared to be in her early to mid-20s. She had long dark black hair, pointed ears, and emotionless dark gray eyes. The woman was dressed in a black sweater with dark jeans and black shoes. Liko also noticed that the woman had a gothic Lolita headpiece on her black hair. Blinking repeatedly at the sight of the woman in her cousin's house, Liko cautiously walked over to her. "Who are you?" Office tilted her head as the silver-haired girl walked over to her. "Who are you?" she asked in an emotionless cold tone. Liko looked taken aback from Office's cold tone, but she assented and answered. "I'm Liko. Issei's cousin." At the mention of Issei, Office's flat eyes softened considerably and she slowly lifted her hand up to point at Liko. "Issei? You are his cousin?" Liko raised an eyebrow at Office. "The way she speaks. It's so weird." "Yeah? Now can you tell me your name?" Staring at Liko momentarily, Office suddenly gave the dark silver-haired girl a sly smile. "I am Office. Your cousin, my Issei, belongs to me." "Wait. What about Issei?" "Issei belongs to me. One day, I shall claim him for myself." Liko suddenly felt a little uneasy around Office and she started to feel a bit anxious. "Claim Issei? What do you mean?" "I have marked Issei. He belongs to me." Liko didn't know how to respond to this. Removing her stare from Liko, Office looked at the living room table and picked up the fortune cookie flyer. Smiling deviously, Office held up the flyer to Liko. "Would you like free food?" Liko raised an eyebrow at his request. "Free food? Grand Ice Shrine." The area around the Grand Ice Shrine was completely silent, so silent that not even a tumbleweed would be able to make a sound by blowing away. Inside the shrine, lay Issei on the ground. His eyes were closed, as though he was asleep. Next to him on the ground was the Kusanagi no Tsurugi itself. Issei's inner world subconscious. "You want to know who I am, partner? Well, here's your answer. I am." Two Kusanagi no Tsurugis clashed against each other, one fierce and proficient and the other clumsy and hesitant. Issei quickly blocked the man's attack. The pressure to hold his own against his opponent strained him greatly. I still don't understand. I don't even know how to use a sword. Issei yelled as the man put more pressure on his sword. What's not to understand, partner? Better concentrate or else you'll lose a limb. Issei tensed as the man pushed him forward. Landing on top of a skyscraper and trying to regain his balance, Issei rubbed his forehead. I don't have a clue on what's going on here. He looked up and he widened his eyes to see the man about to attack him with the Kusanagi no Tsurugi once again. Issei thought quickly and blocked the attack. As soon as the Kusanagi no Tsurugis touched again, both of the swords emitted colorful auras. The color of the man's Kusanagi no Tsurugi emitted a dark crimson aura, while Issei's Kusanagi no Tsurugi released a yellow-orange aura. Issei widened his eyes, while the man deepened his frown. Narrowing his eyes, Issei flew away to the other side of the skyscraper, putting some distance between himself and the man. The man narrowed his eyes and pointed the Kusanagi no Tsurugi towards Issei. Don't be so hesitant. Quicken your pace and attack me. Issei narrowed his eyes as he tried to catch his breath. It's not exactly easy for me. Gritting his teeth, Issei let out a bellow as he transformed into his super solar state. The man shook his head at the sight. Issei screamed louder as he tried to access his hellfire form. Don't even bother. Issei stopped and widened his eyes when he saw a large dark crimson wave of energy soar towards him. Issei quickly dodged the energy wave and looked behind him to see the energy wave decimate an entire multitude of buildings, leaving a large crater in the ground. Oh my god. Don't get all distracted on me. Issei looked back just in time to see the man send another crimson energy blast with the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. Issei tensed and proceeded to block the energy wave with his own sword, but he found it hard to withstand the pressure, so he forced himself to maneuver the Kusanagi no Tsurugi and send the blast to another direction. A bright crimson flash illuminated the space where Issei and the man stood. As the light faded, Issei struggled to catch his breath and then clenched his fist as he pointed to his opponent. Who the hell are you? The man rolled his eyes and then transmitted away. Issei widened his eyes and looked around his surroundings. The man then appeared in front of him, grabbing onto Issei's own version of the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. Holding a tight grip on the sword, the man huffed and clenched his fist, causing the Kusanagi no Tsurugi to break. Issei looked on in shock as the Kusanagi no Tsurugi disintegrated in his hand. The man broke off a piece of the sword and held it up towards Issei. Don't make me repeat myself, partner. Didn't I yell it out to you earlier? My name is Drake, the Red Dragon Emperor. Issei had no time to react when Drake suddenly grabbed his face and threw him into a nearby building. His frown becoming stern, Drake narrowed his eyes as he watched Issei struggling to climb out of the building. For such a powerful brat, you sure do show a lot of stupidity. Issei grunted as he looked Drake in the eyes. When you are in battle, always keep your guard up. That should be an obvious rule, Issei. Well, you were standing there without a weapon like a dumbass, I could have easily just stabbed you. Issei widened his eyes and looked down to see that the Kusanagi no Tsurugi was no longer in his hands. At the sound of Drake's laughter, Issei narrowed his eyes and glared at the disguised Red Dragon Emperor. Battle not going in your favor? Well, the next ones won't if you keep standing around like that. Issei gritted his teeth and tried to increase his energy until Drake pointed the Kusanagi no Tsurugi towards him. You can't access that hellfire transformation of yours, partner. At least not in the human world. Ceasing and attempting to transform, Issei straightened himself. What are you talking about? The reason you can't access it here is really simple. You're not in the underworld. I don't understand. When you absorbed the flames of the Phoenix Devil, not only did you achieve a transformation that allowed you access to the power of hellfire, but you also gained the powers and abilities of an individual of the Phoenix clan. Issei widened his eyes at Drake's explanation. You mean I gained all of Riser's powers? The young man said in a bit of disgust. Now he had a portion of Riser's powers. Great. Exactly. In fact, possessing the powers of a phoenix is exactly the reason why you can only use your hellfire transformation in hell. Because that is where you obtained the form. But I achieved my first solar form in hell as well. That form was attained by your own energy. From your own power. It belongs to you exclusively. When you absorbed the Phoenix Devil's flames, you gained all of his powers and the mystical flames of hellfire itself. Issei blinked as his confusion overtook his rationality. How do you know so much about me? Kukukuku. Well, in simple terms, I've known about you since the day you were born. You could also say I've been watching you since your birth occurred. Issei narrowed his eyes as Drake positioned the Kusanagi no Tsurugi into an offensive position. Enough talk. Prepare yourself, Issei Hyoudou. Issei took a step back and looked down to see the Kusanagi no Tsurugi in his hand once again. He gained a nervous look in his eyes as he settled into a defensive position. I have no idea on how to use a sword, and even if I did, the outcome wouldn't change. I stand no chance against this dragon. He's far stronger than Riser and Kakabiel by a large margin. But he seems to be a lot weaker than Office. I hope she's alright. Drake maintained his frown and charged at Issei. Here I come, Issei. Issei's house. The delivery man of the fortune cookie restaurant gulped nervously as he walked up to the cursed house. So far, nothing has happened to him at the moment. No snakes in his car, no explosive bikes, and more importantly, no snakes. Checking himself to make sure he had his lucky 4-leaf clover and the snake repellent, he smiled and confidently knocked on the door. Seconds later, a black-haired young woman with flat dark gray eyes stared into the delivery man's soul. Nonetheless, the delivery man smiled with a smug air about him. He held out the bag of food to the young woman and smiled wider. Here's your delivery and just 20 minutes to spare. That'll be $30.47, if you please. The office stared blankly at the delivery man and then she smiled. The delivery man's smile lessened into an unsure expression and he paled. Look behind you. Feeling nervous for a moment, the delivery man looked behind him to see nothing. Raising an eyebrow, the delivery man turned back around to see Office with her hand on his neck. What? Boink. The delivery man suddenly collapsed onto the ground, completely unconscious. Office let a sly smirk cross her face as she picked up her food. Score infinity for me. Score 0 for fortune cookie. Feeling proud of herself, Office walked into Issei's house and closed the door behind her. Sitting at the couch was Liko, whose crimson eyes were wide with amazement and/or disbelief. Did you just pressure point the delivery guy? Office smiled as she placed the food on the living room table. Yes, I did. It was fun. Opening the bag, Office's smile fell into an expression akin to a frown. Liko raised an eyebrow. What's up? They put no donuts in here. They forgot donuts. Sitting up from the couch, Office walked over to the door and opened it, glaring down at the unconscious delivery man. Narrowing her dark gray eyes, Office pointed to the man, sending one of her snakes to crawl all over him. Of course you realize this means war, fortune cookie. And with that legendary declaration, Office closed the door. Issei's inner world subconscious. Issei grunted as he blocked another of Drake's strikes. Damn it. Even in my solar form, I don't stand a chance against him. I need an opportunity. Quit dawdling, partner. Issei widened his eyes as he narrowly avoided another crimson blast. Reappearing in front of Issei, Drake smirked and in a motion far too quick for Issei to see, he impaled the young man with the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. Issei widened his eyes and covered his mouth in order to prevent any blood from coming out. Drake smiled as he pushed the sword forward, causing Issei's eyes to widen once more. As I thought. You're a powerful, but far too unskilled partner. I refuse to have a host who is so much weaker than I am. Granted you're nothing to laugh at, but your performance in this battle is pitiful. I won't stand for it. Smirking widely at the look on Issei's face, Drake slowly pulled the sword out of Issei's stomach. Wrong one. Drake widened his eyes and turned around just in time to see Issei's version of the Kusanagi no Tsurugi impale him through the stomach. Drake's face maintained a shocked expression as Issei glared up at him. Out of the disguised Red Dragon Emperor's stomach was a pool of crimson shattering energy particles. Well, you got me, partner. Looks like I underestimated you. But there's a reason I'm the Red Dragon Emperor. Drake's body began to glow as he transformed. Issei widened his eyes and backed away, holding the Kusanagi no Tsurugi in his hand tightly. The Red Dragon Emperor's body began to change and distort into a large red western dragon with green eyes. Issei backed away as the size of Drake towered over the buildings and skyscrapers of his inner world. Narrowing his eyes, Issei gripped a hold on the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. In his true form, Drake peered down at Issei and then started to snicker. Issei raised an eyebrow in confusion. What's so funny? You, partner. You are amusing. Looks like you're not as naive as I originally assumed. Issei remained in his battle stance as he cautiously looked up at Drake. He then widened his eyes when his body began to disappear. What's happening? Very interesting. You have earned my respect, Issei Hyoudou. I shall lend you my power anytime you wish. You can use it to show those who ridiculed you. Issei continued to stare up at the Western Dragon in confusion. Drake then gave Issei a serious look as the young man started to fade away. However, let me give you a warning. If you wish to control my power, make sure you don't slack off before I come back. Issei stared up at the Welsh dragon silently and seconds later, he started to disappear from his own mind. Your mother would be proud. As Drake watched the remaining form of his wielder fade away, a confident smirk formed on his face. Albion. Our battle shall come soon. You better hope your host will have what it takes to defeat this one. The one called Issei Hyoudou. The Grand Ice Shrine. Issei's eyes fluttered and then opened completely. Widening his eyes, Issei looked around his surroundings and looked over to see that the Kusanagi no Tsurugi was no longer in his hands. Where did the sword go? Looking around the shrine, Issei narrowed his eyes and got up from his spot. Issei's house. Issei opened the door to his house and shook his head. Isatoko? Widening his eyes, Issei looked up to see Liko sitting next to a moody office. Liko-san? What are you doing here? Liko sent Issei a smile. I just wanted to see how my cousin was doing. She then looked to Office, who had a pout on her face. But as Office here tells me, it looks like your life is going good so far. Issei raised an eyebrow at his facial expression and then he looked at Liko and offered her a smile. Yeah? I guess you can put it that way. Next day at Kuo Academy. Sitting at his desk, Issei looked out the window of his classroom. He looked up at the sun and sighed deeply. As he looked around the classroom, he noticed that Yuma was once again absent. Where has Yuma-san been? He then noticed that Shulin was absent as well. As he looked back at the sun, he felt someone walk up to him. Issei Hyoudou? At the call of his name, Issei looked up to see Tsubaki looking down at him, her hands to her side. Staring at Tsubaki blankly, Issei's eyes widened in recognition. Oh, it's you. Getting up from his desk, Issei put his hands in his pockets. Is something wrong, and secondly, is it important? Tsubaki maintained her stoic expression as she gazed at Issei. Before her stoic gaze could break down, Tsubaki closed her eyes. I choose One-sama is here. She would like to speak with you, as well as Surzuke-sama. Issei narrowed his eyes at the last person Tsubaki had mentioned, but he calmed himself quickly. What do Surzuke want to talk about? He didn't particularly mind what Sona's older sister wanted to talk about, but if Surzuke wanted to talk to him, the Crimson Mayu had better be expecting another falcon punch in the face. Unaware of Issei's passing thoughts, Tsubaki opened her light brown eyes. He didn't say. DCH. Issei muttered. Tsubaki raised an eyebrow at Issei's response, and then her eyes widened considerably as she noticed that Issei had a red stain showing through his white shirt. You're bleeding. Raising an eyebrow, Issei looked down to see that there was blood on his shirt. Lifting the top of his shirt away from him, the young man widened his eyes to see that there was a large cut mark on his stomach. How did I get cut just now? This morning, it was just fine. Was it from Drake? It definitely couldn't have been from Kakabiel because I transferred away from him. He tensed when he felt a hand reach down to his stomach. He quickly gripped Tsubaki's hand and held it tightly. Tsubaki widened her eyes slightly as she met Issei's stern gaze. Who was going to heal you? Issei's turn looked dissolved into a look of hesitance and he gently released his grip on Tsubaki's hand. It doesn't hurt. If it did, I would have noticed it by now. I'm fine. But you need to be healed before the blood flow increases. Tsubaki insisted. It's alright. Let's just go meet Sona's One-sama and the Surzuke. I can heal myself afterwards. You're such a strange boy, Issei Hyoudou. Tsubaki said as she raised an eyebrow at Issei. Issei sent Tsubaki a sad look. If I had a nickel for every time that phrase has been said. Tsubaki kept her gaze on Issei for a while and she stood still in her spot. Issei's eyes softened and he sighed and looked away. I appreciate your offer to heal me, but not now. I just want to get this over with. Staring at Issei for a moment, Tsubaki's eyes softened. Follow me, Issei. The student council room. Tsubaki opened the door to the student council and she and Issei walked inside to see Sona with a young woman with black hair and pigtails and violet eyes. Next to the siblings was Surzuke Lucifer himself and a young woman of Riser's peerage. Issei kept a calm face as he looked at the familiar and unfamiliar people in the room. Sona, Surzuke, and then the rest of Riser's peerage walked out of the room with Tsubaki following them and closing the door behind her. Turning around, Issei then realized that he was alone with Sona's older sister. The girl held up a hand and motioned Issei. Issei Hyoudou. If you would please sit down. Issei complied and sat at the desk across from Seraphol Leviathan. Seraphol was normally cheerful, with a childlike air about her, but even she knew when to be serious. Which was why she was cautious with the young boy in front of her. Maintaining a stoic air about her, not unlike her younger sister, Seraphol folded her hands on the desk and spoke. My name is Seraphol. Seraphol Leviathan. I've asked for you here today because I wanted to talk to you, Issei. Issei remained quiet. He didn't want to say anything yet. If this woman wanted to talk to him, then the least he could do is be respectful. Seraphol gulped as she spoke carefully. I wanted to tell you that we Devil Seraphol began as she hesitated in her words. The Satan with the title of Leviathan tapped her hands on the desk. Not all devils are the same, Issei. I know from what happened to you, you might not believe me, and I completely understand if you didn't. However, every devil is different. What Riser Phoenix and Surzik-chan did to you in the underworld, it was completely reckless and inexcusable of them. They caused so much psychological damage to you, all because they wanted to see how powerful you were. Serapho looked up and locked her bright violet eyes with Issei's own multicolored orbs of sight. I just want you to understand something. In spite of what Surzik-chan and Riser have done, please understand that the rest of us devils are in no way like that. I get what you're saying, Leviathan-san. Serapho widened her eyes at Issei's first words since their one-sided conversation. Issei crossed his arms as he adopted a stern expression. I understand that every devil is different. It's completely unreasonable of me if I were to assume that every devil is evil. It's not exactly justifiable of me to hate devils just because two members of their species wronged me. Serapho's eyes widened further as she listened to Issei's words. Issei sighed as he rubbed his head and looked into Serapho's eyes. That's why I suggested to your sister that she and her peerage stay away from me and vice versa. That way, there will be no conflict between us. The Satan with the title of Leviathan's eyes softened as she gazed at Issei. I'm glad to hear you say that, Issei Hyoudou. I don't hate the devils. I just don't trust them. The devil and Issei remained quiet for a few moments before Serapho spoke once again. There was something else I wanted to talk to you about. Yesterday, a battle was supposed to commence here at Kuo Academy, but the one who initiated the fight, which was a fallen angel, never showed up. Issei remained silent as he started to feel that he knew who was supposed to show up. Serapho gave Issei an unreadable gaze. When Sona told me about the event that had taken place here, I rushed to get here. The two members on the opposing side were already defeated and the rest of us devils waited for the fallen angel to show up. But then, another devil arrived at Kuo Academy. It was a kid with silver hair. He told us that Kakabiel had already been incapacitated. All thanks to you, Issei. Issei inwardly scoffed as he remembered the devil who had asked him to hand over Kakabiel. As he looked into Serapho's eyes, Issei straightened himself in his seat. I just happened to be passing by when I saw Kakabiel. He tried to manipulate and goad me into joining the fallen angels. Serapho exclaimed as her eyes widened. Issei closed his eyes as he crossed his arms. I refused. Only because I knew he was manipulating me. If that devil hadn't shown up to retrieve him, not even Kakabiel's ashes would have remained. The Leviathan felt a chill go up her spine at Issei's last sentence, but she composed herself. The reason I'm telling you this is because I wanted to thank you. Issei raised an eyebrow in confusion. Thank you? I didn't do anything. Issei widened his eyes when Serapho suddenly gave him a warm smile. Because you fought Kakabiel, you prevented an event that would have shaken the angels, fallen angels, and devils, and to top it all off, you saved everyone at Kuo Academy, including my younger sister and her peerage, as well as Riaz-chan and her peerage. So I inadvertently saved all of the devils at Kuo Academy. So, Ice-chan, I thank you for that. Feeling a little weird at the very affectionate suffix to his nickname, Issei chose not to respond and simply nodded. The door to the student council room opened, revealing Surzik and the rest of Riser's peerage. Surzik began. Serapho smiled in response. Yes, Surzik-chan. I'm done. Sitting up from her seat, she walked over to Issei and smiled at him, oblivious to Issei's confused stare. When Serapho was sitting down, Issei couldn't see her lower body, so he was completely shocked that she had a childlike body. It was nice talking to you, Ice-chan. I hope we can speak again. And with that, the older sister of Sona walked out of the student council room, leaving Issei with Surzik and Riser's peerage. Issei Hyoudou, Surzik stated as he walked over to sit at the desk across from Issei. Issei gave Surzik an indifferent nod and looked over at the young women who had accompanied the Crimson Satan. Within the crowd he noticed Shulin, who lowered her gaze from Issei. As Surzik sat down, he placed his hands on his lap and maintained a calm air about him. Issei, I believe you know why I am here. Riser's possessions? Issei asked as he looked over to Shulin. That's right. You already sent Shulin to my house in order to convince me otherwise. Why are you so eager to give me Riser's inheritance? It's not so much that we are eager, Issei Hyoudou, Surzik began. We are doing what we think is the correct way to amend our ties with you. Issei raised an eyebrow at the statement and crossed his arms. Pretty strange way to amend relationships. He thought to himself. Wealth won't change my opinions no matter how valuable it is. I understand what you are saying. The young women of Riser's peerage remained quiet as each of them gazed at Issei. Only Shulin had come in contact with Issei the most, only because the rest of the servants did not want to get on Issei's bad side. However, as they looked at Issei recently, they noticed that he was actually calm while talking to Surzik. Opening his eyes, Issei pointed to Surzik. "I'm willing." Surzik raised an eyebrow at the young man's words. "What do you mean?" "I'm willing to consider accepting Riser's inheritance, but I also have conditions." Surzik blinked in surprise for a moment before he smiled inwardly. Not in amusement nor in trickery, but in genuine relief. "Name them." Issei put his hand under his chin as he looked at the young women in the student council room. "First, they go nowhere near my house." Shulin widened her eyes at Issei's first condition. Issei narrowed his eyes as he pointed to the girls. "I don't like the idea of having 15 girls in my house. The only 3 women who should be in the house are my mother, my cousin Liko, and Office." Office. At the mention of the all-powerful dragon god, Riser's peerage paled, and Surzik, to his credit, widened his eyes in a bit of horror and shock. "Office? It lives with Issei Hyoudou. What does it want with him?" "Office? The infinite dragon god. Does it live with you?" Issei raised an eyebrow at the personal pronoun Surzik used to describe Office. "Yeah, she lives with me." Surzik opened his mouth to reveal to Issei that Office was actually genderless, but then he thought better and closed his mouth. Issei lifted up 2 fingers and frowned. "Second, if it's really necessary, only 3 girls from Riser's peerage can come to my house at a time. Not live, but visit my house. Like I said, 15 girls in my house is too much for me to handle. Not to mention that Office would probably throw a fit." Issei amended his thoughts. The young man then lifted another finger as he looked at Surzik. "My third and final condition is." 2 hours later, still in the student council room. The blood flow seems to have stopped. "I'm surprised by Kaichu's Wani-sama and Surzik-sama never commented on your appearance. I'm just glad that I was able to keep it together, especially when I was still bleeding." Tsubaki sent Issei a strange look in response to his statement, and she went to heal the bloodied mark on his stomach. She narrowed her light brown eyes as she peered at the mark. "It's as though someone stabbed him with a blade. Has he been fighting with a sword?" She raised an eyebrow questioningly at Issei, who looked down as his cut sealed up. Making sure the spots of blood were gone, Issei put his shirt back down and dusted himself off. He then stood up and reached to lift Tsubaki up to a standing position. "Thanks for healing me. Consider Kaichu's gratitude for saving the school from Kakebiel," Tsubaki stated brusquely. Issei raised an eyebrow at Tsubaki's response. "Inadvertently. Don't forget inadvertently," Issei said as he walked away from the girl. "Issei." Stopping in his tracks, Issei turned around to face Tsubaki, who kept her gaze on the young man. "Has your initial opinion of the devils lessened?" Issei was silent as he thought of his response. As much as he wanted to deny it, he really could not blame every single devil in this world. Surzik Lucifer and Riser Phoenix were the only devils who had wronged him. Sure, it was natural for Issei to dislike those specific devils from a certain standpoint, viewed as he realized from what Serafal had stated earlier. He then realized that not all devils were the same. Feigning a serious look in his eyes, Issei frowned as he looked off to the side. "Not every devil is the same," Issei began quietly. "So it isn't fair of me to assume that all devils are the same when 2 of them had already set themselves up for a bad appearance, while the 2 of them here were actually nice to me." Tsubaki maintained her sharp stare as she remained quiet. Issei narrowed his eyes and looked at Sona's queen. "I don't hate the devils, Shinra-san. That's all I have to say." And with that, Issei walked out of the student council room, leaving Tsubaki alone. "What kind of being are you, Issei Hyoudou?" Issei's house. Walking upstairs to his room, Issei looked up to see Office sitting on his bed. Her expression seemed to be more devoid of emotion, which worried Issei. "Office? Are you alright?" "No. I am not alright." Issei widened his eyes. Her speech changed. "She's talking normally now." Office turned to look at Issei, and her eyes lowered into an expression akin to sadness. "I say, you're troubled. That worries me." "Troubled? No, I'm fine, Op." "No, you are not," Office said as she interrupted Issei. "You are troubled, my Issei. Your energy has become less radiant. Less pure. I do not like that." Issei widened his eyes further as he listened to Office's words. Her dark gray eyes narrowing sadly, Office got up from the bed and walked over to Issei, placing her hands on his cheeks. "Issei belongs to me," Office began possessively. "No one shall take you away from me. Issei is mine, because you are not a bad person. You are my first and only mate." Office, Issei thought. Office then pressed Issei against her, placing his head at the base of her neck. "I like it when Issei is happy. I do not like it when you are conflicted. I do not like it when you are distant from me. I do not like that at all." Issei's eyes softened as he looked away. "Am I really becoming darker? Issei." At the call of his name, Issei looked into his eyes. Office brought her face close to Issei's own. I love silence. I love Issei. Silence is my second love. Issei Hyoudou, my Issei is my first love. I love you, my Issei. You're mine. Issei widened his eyes in amazement and was too late to react when Office brought her face closer and pressed her lips onto Issei's own. The young man widened his eyes at Office's possessive lock on his lips, claiming them as hers only. The young man felt as though time had just stopped for him, and how could he not? This was his first time kissing someone, and he certainly didn't expect the infinite dragon god to claim his first kiss. Issei's inner world subconscious. Braig smirked as he watched his wielder's kiss stolen by the dragon god. Interesting. It seems that one of the strongest existences has fallen for my host. I must say that I am impressed. Issei's room. Office released her lips from Issei's own and gave the young man a smile. The kiss. I like that. Issei stood shell-shocked and he touched his own lips in amazement. He tensed when Office suddenly gripped his collar and held him possessively. Do you understand, Issei? I do not like it when you are not happy. I do not like it when you are not with me. I do not like that, not at all. Issei blinked several times before he closed his eyes and gently grabbed his hand. Sorry, Office. It's just that I'm not used to being with someone. He then opened his eyes and looked into his own. I don't know what will happen in the future, but I do know this. I'll be with you all the way, Office. I promise you. In emphasis to his statement, Issei tightened his hold on Office's hand and sent her a smile. Office smiled in response and placed her head on Issei's shoulder. By Issei. Issei relaxed into a comfortable position as he sat under the shade of the tree. His back was currently leaning against a tall plant, his eyes closed in a peaceful manner. He had no idea what compelled him to wake up so early in the morning. Perhaps it was his old habit of wanting to see the sun rise up to the sky as much as he could. Wake up, sleepyhead. A familiar voice uttered gently. At the sound of the voice, Issei opened his eyes and looked up to see a brown-haired young woman gazing at him with crimson ruby eyes. His vision slightly blurry, Issei blinked as he leaned forward to see who it was. Liko-san. Rise and shine, I Satoko. Liko Hyoudou greeted me with a smile. The young man blinked again. What was Liko doing here? Moving her eyes away from Issei for the moment, Liko turned to look at the rising sun in the sky. A small smile formed on her face as she chuckled softly and she looked back to her younger cousin. Mind if I sit with you? She asked. In response to his cousin's request, Issei scooted over to give her some room on the ground, to which Liko happily took. As she sat down next to her cousin, Liko laid her elbows on her knees and leaned her head on the tree. The two cousins were silent as they watched the short cycle of the sun. A few minutes later, the silence was broken by the elder Hyoudou. It's been a long time since we've done this. Liko remarked with a nostalgic air in her voice. We used to watch the sun when we were little. Yeah? Issei said softly with a faint smile of his own. Looking over to her cousin, Liko tilted her head slightly. She watched her cousin as he looked up at the sky almost wistfully. Just as Liko's mind was about to become almost sidetracked, the sound of her younger cousin's voice brought her back to reality. Liko-san? She hummed in reply. The younger Hyoudou moved his head to look at his older cousin. Your hair's back to normal. He observed, did you stop dyeing it or something? Liko suppressed a snicker as she folded her arms. I'm glad you noticed. She said, yes, as a matter of fact, I did stop dyeing it. Why do you ask? Do I still look like an angel? She was only teasing her cousin when she asked him the question, so the response he gave her immediately made her mind stop in its tracks. Of course you do, Liko-san. Issei answered sincerely. Liko gasped at her cousin's answer. Now that I think about it, Issei continued as he rubbed the back of his head. I think some angels have brown hair too. Liko was silent as she felt her cheeks heat up. She quickly looked back up at the sky to avoid her younger cousin's eyes. It's a little weird actually. Issei said as he frowned slightly. What's weird? Liko couldn't resist asking. But you still kind of look like an angel, Liko-san. Her younger cousin began, and yet I haven't really seen anyone try to ask you out or show any interest in you. Liko could practically feel her entire face steaming due to the impact of her cousin's words. Nevertheless, Issei was a bit correct. No one had ever asked her out before. That's because you're not interested in anyone, but her conscience almost told her, before she quickly shut it out. Liko struggled to gather her thoughts and ignore her conscience. Her face was still red, and the spiraling thoughts that consisted of her younger cousin wasn't making things any easier. It's because of you. Liko said quietly. Because of me? Issei repeated, causing Liko to jump in shock. Liko's eyes widened in shock as she quickly shut her mouth. Had she said that out loud? What's because of me? Issei asked innocently. The elder Hyoudou's mouth remained open as she tried to think coherently. Seconds later, she turned her head away as she attempted to form a legitimate frown. "See that my face is all red, you dummy?" She pouted, "You shouldn't say things like that. Especially when you don't mean them." "But I do mean it, Liko-san." Issei insisted, unintentionally making his older cousin's heart flutter. Liko's attempted frown immediately disappeared and was replaced by a look of shock. She mustered up the will to hold in her ever-growing blush and gave her younger cousin a false look of annoyance. "You shouldn't lie to your cousin like that," she muttered. "But I wouldn't lie to you, Liko-san." Issei insisted again, "What kind of cousin would I be if I never told you the truth?" The elder Hyoudou felt her entire body shake, her heart beating and fluttering quickly. As her frown disappeared, Liko reacted and suddenly hugged her cousin tightly. Issei gasped in surprise, not expecting his cousin to do that. Not hearing or either ignoring Issei's response, Liko tightened her hug and moved her lips to her cousin's cheek. Issei's eyes widened as Liko placed a sweet yet chaste kiss on his cheek. Seconds later, Liko ended the kiss and released her cousin from her embrace. "Liko-san?" Issei said as he rubbed his cheek in confusion. Liko chuckled softly at the look her cousin was giving her. Her Issei really was something else. If only he wasn't so naive and literal-minded sometimes. And what exactly is wrong with it? Her very annoying conscience made itself known once more. "You know you love that trait of his." Liko ignored the small part of her psyche for the time being and beamed a small smile at Issei, who blinked only once at her. Yes, her Issei was indeed something else. Inside of Kuo Academy. Walking into his classroom, Issei widened his eyes when he noticed someone who he hadn't seen in a while. Yuma-san. Rainer, in the form of Yuma, sat quietly at her desk. Issei gained a serious look in his eyes as he detected her energy signal. She's a fallen angel. Gotta say, I didn't see that coming." Rainer looked up and her violet eyes widened as she saw Issei looking at her. Locking her eyes with his, Rainer held herself and looked away. "Welcome back," Issei said to her. Issei sighed as he walked over to the fallen angel. Crossing his arms, Issei looked out of the window. "I take the reason you haven't been here was because of me, right?" Issei asked as he looked back at Rainer. "Not exactly. Originally, I stopped coming here because of your anger towards the devils. I assumed that, as soon as you came into contact with one here, you would explode or something." Rainer looked up at Issei and crossed her arms. "Bunvali Lucifer, the devil who brought back Kakabiel, told us that you were the one who bisected Kakabiel. I was honestly terrified. Kakabiel? He called you a monster. The most terrifying being he had ever come in contact with. A monster? What a hypocrite." Rainer widened her eyes in confusion as Issei sent her a bitter smile. "I'm not a devil. I'm not a fallen angel. I'm not an angel. Hell, I'm not even human. Issei-kun. How can he say something like that?" Rainer's eyes remained widened in awe as she listened to Issei's words. He then looked down to Rainer. "I don't hold anything against you, Yuma-san. To me, race doesn't matter. I still consider you an acquaintance." Rainer couldn't speak as she felt a luminescent blush form on her face. "Issei." Both Issei and Rainer looked up to see Shulin walking towards them. Rainer narrowed her eyes on the Chinese devil while Issei maintained a calm stance. "Shulin-san." Issei greeted as he nodded to her. Nodding and smiling at Issei in response, Shulin sent Rainer an unreadable glance and set her gaze back to Issei. "The rest of the girls and I wanted to know what time of the meeting to talk about Riser's inheritance is good for you." Issei adopted a thoughtful expression as he pondered his decision. No doubt Riser had a lot of stuff in his possessions. "Maybe I'll bring Office with me when I go to this meeting. Let's have the meeting in 2 days." Issei answered. Dimensional gap. The dimensional gap existed as the gap between the realms, Earth, Heaven, and the underworld. It had the appearance of an endless void, where in every direction, there was a mix of iridescent colors. Issei found himself mesmerized and taken aback by the sight in front of him. He dare say that it was quite possibly the most beautiful realm he'd ever set his eyes on. "Office, what is this place?" he asked, earning a small smile from the infinite dragon god. "This is my home." The dimensional gap. Dimensional gap. Issei repeated softly, "It's a really beautiful place." Originally the birthplace of Office, it was currently rented by none other than the Apocalypse Dragon, the Great Red. Office narrowed her eyes as she sensed the dragon who took her home. "Aka Red?" Issei asked. Before Office could reply, a crack tore through the dimensional gap, revealing a massive red western dragon with golden eyes. Issei widened his eyes as he sensed the overwhelming power of the dragon in his sight. "Amazing." "Aka Red?" Office muttered. Great Red, the Apocalypse Dragon, and the true Red Dragon God Emperor paused in his motion as he glared down at Office. He then stopped when he noticed something different about the Ouroboros dragon. "Office? Did you grow?" The office frowned as she refused to answer the Great Red's question. Huffing at her lack of response, the Apocalypse Dragon turned to look at Issei Hyoudou, and his golden eyes widened a little. I remember this energy. It's from this kid. This must be the one Office was talking about when she went through that tangent of hers. Issei stared wide-eyed as he looked at the colossal dragon. His power is completely off the charts. His strength, when compared to Office, they feel about the same. Staring at Issei for a moment, Great Red turned his attention to Office, who was still glaring at him. Hey, Office. Is this the kid that belongs to you? Yes. My Issei is mine. Great Red said as he looked back at Issei. Office, who is this guy? Issei whispered to Office as he leaned closer to her. He is the Apocalypse Dragon. The Great Red. His strength lies within the dreams and realities of beings. He is the Rizoni have left my home. He took my home away from me. Issei widened his eyes and looked up at Great Red in confusion. The young man narrowed his eyes and then levitated, flying up to the height of Great Red's horn. So you're the reason why Office ran away from her home. So she says. Great Red countered. The true Red Dragon God Emperor and Issei suddenly began to emit auras from their bodies. Emitting from Great Red's scales was the vast crimson energy pressure. Emitting from Issei was the flames from his super solar form. Staring at each other, the auras of Issei and Great Red began to expand. You know, Issei began. In a way, you and Office balance each other out. She represents the nothingness of infinity. You, on the other hand, represent the power of dreams. Nothingness is infinite all by itself, but your power as long as dreams continue to exist, then your strength is infinite as well. Nice observation, Brad. If you really think about it, since you two more or less represent the aspects of infinity, that would sort of make you and Office related. Like siblings. That's right. That would also make you sort of like my brother-in-law. So it seems. The tension between Issei and the true Red Dragon God Emperor was fierce as their boundless auras expanded within the dimensional gap. The two strong beings narrowed their eyes as they stared at each other. The Office watched the scene with a cold expression, waiting to see what would happen to her mate and her enemy sibling, but what happened next was something not even the Infinite Dragon would have been able to predict. Woo! High five! Issei and Great Red cheered out simultaneously as they clashed their hands together. As soon as their hands touched, the destructive power of Great Red collided with Issei's solar energy, causing the dimensional gap to shake momentarily. What? Office muttered silently. The Ouroboros dragon widened her eyes at the most shocking thing in her life. By Issei and Great Red getting along? Akakaka. How interesting. So Office has claimed you as her mate. That could only mean we were destined to be brothers. Great Red exclaimed as he smirked at Issei. Issei smiled as he clenched his hand into a fist. This is too awesome for words. One of the two strongest beings in existence and he's my brother-in-law. Awesome. Grinning widely at each other, Great Red and Issei bumped fists, chuckling at each other. Office, on the other hand, looked at her mate and her brother in absolute astonishment. Smiling widely, Issei turned to look at Office. Office, Great Red doesn't seem like a bad guy. He's just being a good brother. Narrowing her eyes at her mate for the first time, Office flew up to Issei and glared at the Great Red, pointing to him. Great Red is noisy. He is distracting. He makes too much noise. I was born here first. He needs to leave. Issei shared a glance with the Great Red before they looked back at Office. Office's eyes twitched as she palmed her face in a manner similar to the one she had learned it from. This is embarrassing. My mate and Great Red brothers-in-law. This is not fair. Oh come on, Office. Don't be mean to your brother. Kakakaka. Great Red cackled as he gave Office a cheeky grin. Feeling an unfamiliar emotion within her, Office held out her hand and began to charge a black energy blast towards the Great Red, who widened his eyes at the unexpected attack. Issei raised an eyebrow at the scene and sighed. They sure do fight like siblings. Office, being the oldest, and Great Red being the youngest. Hey! Office cut it out. Great Red yelled out in annoyance. I shall blast Baka Red's mouth. Office said in a menacing tone as she increased the intensity of her energy blast. Yep, definitely like siblings. Issei amended. Issei's house. Well, that wasn't too bad. I did not like your interaction with Baka Red. Issei smiled as he looked to the side to see Office lying next to him on the bed. The Infinite Dragon God frowned cutely at her mate as she held him close. After the revelation that she and Great Red were in fact related, Office, for the first time, was shocked. Her shock had turned to horrified realization when Issei pointed out that he and the Great Red were, in simpler terms, brothers-in-law. To put it short, Office was not happy at all about this. You don't have to worry, Office. Great Red doesn't really seem that bad to me. Issei said. Issei looked at the Ouroboros dragon curiously and blinked several times. Office gazed at her mate with her usual emotionless expression, though the look on her face appeared to be more annoyed than anything. Red is too noisy. He annoys me. He's like your opposite. You like quiet places, while Great Red is noisy like a biker guy. Exactly. He is my antithesis. I'm not so sure about that, Office. Office tilted her head at Issei's statement and raised an eyebrow in a questioning manner. What do you mean? Sitting up straight, Issei smiled at the infinite dragon god. It's like I said earlier. You both represent infinity. You were born from the nothingness of infinity, while Great Red was born from dreams. You, and Great Red, in my opinion, are the absolute strongest beings in existence, Office. You're also my family, and I'm glad that I got to know you both. Even though Office's facial expression remained cold and emotionless, she felt something stir within her. Ever since she was born, Office felt only the nothingness of eternity, possessing no ounce of emotion. When floating around in the dimensional gap, she merely basked in the nothingness in her home. All she desired was silence, as it was initially her first craving. Then many years later, the being in front of her was born. When sensing his energy for the first time, she felt something clouding over her state of nothingness. I say, my mate. Office stated as she hugged Issei tighter. The infinite dragon god's love for Issei, to put in shorter terms, was infinite. In a way, all three of them, herself, Issei, and Great Red, represented a certain aspect of infinity. Office was nothingness, Great Red was illusion of dreams, and Issei. I say, his energy is virtually infinite. He is like myself, and Great Red. Issei represents the quasi-aspect of infinity. Issei. Office blinked and looked to see her mate sleeping peacefully. Tilting her head, Office released Issei from her arms and brought her hand to caress his cheek gently. I say, you are sleeping like an angel. The sly smile formed on Office's face as she tilted her head. Her sharp dark gray eyes glinted as she smiled wider. If my Issei was an angel, only I shall be the one to make him fall into nothingness. I am nothingness. Issei is mine. I am the nothingness that will hide its mate. I love my Issei. Outside Issei's house. Rias, this is a terrible idea. No, scratch that, it's a stupid idea. Hush, Sona. Sona rolled her eyes as she watched her childhood friend set the ladder in front of Issei's house. The Citri devil shook her head in disappointment. After Serafal and Tsubaki had informed her that Issei's opinion of the devils had changed for the better, Sona did not hesitate to tell Rias about the news. What a horrible mistake. Eager to introduce herself to Issei, Rias followed the traces of Issei's energy and tracked it to his house. Sona, worried about what her friend was getting herself into, followed her to make sure nothing would happen. Rias, why did you even bring a ladder? Sighing tiredly, Rias turned to glare at her friend. Because if I knock on his house door, there's a chance Office might answer. Tsubaki already told us how possessive Office was of Issei, so that plan is sure to fail epically. I'm not going to risk that, and I'm not dumb enough to teleport in his room either. So using a ladder is a sure and much safer way to talk to Issei. Have fun getting beaten up by Office then. Sona said as she walked away from her friend, quickly losing hope and patience towards Rias. Outing at her friend, Rias scoffed and climbed up the ladder, almost all the way to the top of Issei's room window. The crimson-haired devil held in her breath as she took another step and she climbed up the ladder. Raising her head up, her blue-green eyes widened when she looked into a pair of dark gray soulless eyes. Boo. Rias screamed in terror as she fell off the ladder, landing on the grass with a thud. Rubbing her sore head, Rias looked up to see Office staring down at her from Issei's window. Office. The Ouroboros dragon suddenly granted Rias a sly smile and narrowed her eyes. Issei belongs to me. She stated menacingly. Looking at the standing ladder, Office smiled wider and lifted up a finger. A black spark of energy began to emit from her finger and the infinite dragon god shot the blast at the ladder, completely disintegrating it to ashes. Rias gasped. As she watched the ladder crumbling to pieces, Office set her sights to Rias and gave her a smug smile. Enjoy the climb back up, bitch. Ignoring the shocked and horrified look on Ria's face, Office closed Issei's window and walked away to sit next to her mate on the bed. As she sat on the ground, Rias widened her eyes as she realized something. Did Office just call me a bitch? Issei's room. I say. Office stated in satisfaction as she went to lay on Issei's bed. Her eyes then widened in shock when she saw that Issei was no longer in his bed. The Ouroboros dragon narrowed her eyes darkly as she immediately knew who could have taken her precious mate. The dimensional gap. Issei and Great Red stared at each other quietly. Issei rubbed his eyes tiredly, trying to figure out how Great Red, who was a colossal dragon, was able to stealthily bring him to the dimensional gap without Office noticing. Issei rubbed his head awkwardly, while Great Red looked around the dimensional gap in boredom. While they both were happy that they were more or less family now, they had no idea what the other liked. As from what Office had told, or complained, to Issei, Great Red apparently liked to perform crazy moves within the dimensional gap. Crazy moves, huh? Now that I think about it, I heard at school that there was supposed to be a motorcycle racing tournament later on. Issei thought. It was at that moment that both Issei and Great Red began to read each other's thoughts. Both of their eyes widened as they found that they were thinking of a certain subject. Smiling widely at each other, Issei and Great Red raised their fists up and pointed to each other knowingly. Omthi then bumped fists, their vast energies colliding against each other in a flare of crimson solar energy, causing the dimensional gap to shake once again. "Wanna go ride motorcycles?" Issei asked. Great Red gave Issei a wide smirk. "Bitchin'. Baka Red." Issei and Great Red turned to see Office glaring at the two with a furious look on her face. "Crap." Great Red uttered. "Issei's house. I don't think I've ever seen Office mad before." Clenching her fists, Office glared darkly at Issei, who was feeling a little mindful about how he was going to calm the Ouroboros dragon down. "Office. Baka Red." Office grumbled. Issei gulped as he tried to sit still. He knew he wasn't the only one suffering. As soon as he and Great Red tried to teleport to the motorcycle tournament, Office appeared in the dimensional gap. Needless to say, Issei and Great Red knew they were both in trouble. After looking regretfully at Great Red, Issei opted to teleport himself back to his home, as he knew Office would save him for last. And now here he was, at the mercy of the infinite dragon god. "Office. Why were you with Baka Red?" Office asked darkly. Issei wanted to point out that Great Red was actually the one who took him to the dimensional gap in the first place, but he didn't want to put his brother-in-law into any more trouble. Sighing, Issei bravely walked up to the dragon god, ready to explain. "Earlier at school, I heard about a motorcycle racing tournament. Since you told me that Great Red liked doing crazy moves, I thought it would be a good event for him." Issei blinked several times as he waited for Office to speak her mind. The Ouroboros dragon currently had conflicting thoughts. On one hand, she didn't like Great Red's influence on her mate, but on the other hand, the desire to keep Issei all to herself predominated her thoughts. "Office. Do you really hate it when Great Red and I try to spend time together?" "I do not hate it. I do not like it when you are not with me." Issei widened his eyes in realization. "So you wanted to go with us, then?" Office walked closer to Issei and lifted her finger, placing it on Issei's forehead. "It does not matter where you and I go. As long as I am with my Issei, then I am satisfied." "Office. I love my Issei. When Baka Red stole you from me when I was distracted, I felt worried. Baka Red has already stolen and occupied my home for some time. The very act of Baka Red trying to steal you away from me. That is unacceptable." The young man widened his eyes when he felt his hands on his cheek. As he looked into his eyes, he no longer detected the usual emotionless or possessive look in her eyes. Her eyes now showed worry, emptiness, and love. Office's eyes looked so empty. Placing his hands on the infinite dragon god's own, Issei offered Office a soft smile. "Office, you don't have to worry. Like I said, I'll be by your side. I'll protect you and be with you any way that I can. I promise you." Issei then smiled wider and placed his hands on his chest so he could feel the dragon god's heartbeat. "You always say you were born out of the nothingness of infinity. So if that's true, that must mean I'm the part of infinity thought. I guess in a way, overflows past nothingness." Office's eyes began to gain a softer edge as she listened to Issei's words. She widened her eyes when she felt something wet slide down from her eye. "My Issei." The infinite dragon god stuttered. Issei's smile softened as he went to rub the tear away from Office's eyes. "You, Great Red, and I guess we're like a trinity." "The trinity?" Issei smiled as he pointed to Office. "The nothingness of infinity." He then pointed to his own head, tapping it twice and alluding to dreams. "Great Red, the illusion of dreams." He then pointed to himself and paused. Well, I don't exactly know what aspect of infinity I represent, but I do know this. I'm the infinity that completely fills up nothingness." Office stared wide-eyed at Issei. "By Issei." The young man in front of her filled the infinity she represented. He was one who existed to burst within the void, to completely surpass the trenches of nothingness. That was why Office felt so content with Issei. He filled her with so much raw emotion. He made her feel so much. So many emotions, an aspect she had always thought she would never experience. Feeling herself overwhelmed by a sudden rush of emotion, Office locked her lips with Issei, once more claiming his lips as her own. The Ouroboros dragon loved Issei deeply, her desire growing to the point that she wanted to be with him forever. She, Great Red, and Issei all represented the aspects of infinity, and although Office still didn't tolerate the presence of Great Red, as long as Issei remained with her, then she could endure. Releasing her lips from Issei's own, Office hugged Issei in a softer grip. Are you alright now, office? Issei asked quietly. Yes, I am fine. My Issei. Next day at the mansion of the Phoenix clan. So this is the Phoenix mansion. Issei. Why are we here? Issei smiled as he looked over towards Office, who held his hand. The couple stood in front of a large white mansion. I'm supposed to get some benefits today, Office. Office tilted her head as she looked at the mansion. Benefits? She asked. Issei nodded in response. Yeah, Issei began as he rubbed his head. The devils are so eager to give me Riser's inheritance. Well, might as well go inside. As Office held his hand tightly, Issei walked with her inside the Phoenix mansion, looking around his surroundings in awe. Issei. Both Issei and Office looked to see Shulin walking over to them with a smile on her face. Her smile faltered a little when she noticed the powerful aura of Office, but she managed to compose herself as she looked back to Issei. I'll show you where the meeting is. I'm glad you could make it. Shulin led Issei and Office through a series of hallways and doors until the trio stopped at a door painted in gold. Gaining an almost nervous look on her face, Shulin sent Issei a slight smile. This is it, she said as she opened the door, revealing a large number of devils. Inside the room were none other than Surzik Lucifer and Lord Phoenix, who both looked to see Issei. They both widened their eyes and tensed as they noticed the Ouroboros dragon holding Issei's hand, but eventually they compassed themselves and turned to look at Issei and nodded to them. Issei Hyoudou. They greeted each other simultaneously. Issei nodded to the both of them as he sat down on the remaining seat. As he looked around, he found that there were no more seats in the room. Before he could say anything, Office suddenly plopped down onto his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck possessively. The devils in the room all widened their eyes in bafflement, including Surzik and Lord Phoenix. The sight of an adult Office sitting on a teenage Issei's lap brought a somewhat misleading thought to the devils' minds. Surprisingly able to keep calm about the position Office was in, Issei nodded to Lord Phoenix. So let's start the meeting. As you wish. Riser's father stated. Clearing his throat, the Phoenix Lord clasped his hands together. Issei Hyoudou. As a result of the actions of Riser Phoenix, you have been bestowed his possessions. What you have inherited is of great importance. Issei nodded as he listened to the next part. According to the documents regarding Riser's inheritance, you have been granted 30 billion bloodstones, this mansion, and all of its items within it, secrets of the Phoenix clan possessions, and lastly. Kuku. So you finally came to your senses and accepted what you have earned. Issei widened his eyes at the unexpected arrival of the deep voice. Greg. Long time no talk, partner. I must say, getting the possessions of a member of the Phoenix clan will be beneficial for you. The only question is, how good will it be? Don't know exactly. You remember what I told you during our battle? When you transformed into your Hellfire state for the first time during your battle with Riser Phoenix, you gained the powers of a phoenix. Do you know what that means, partner? No. That means, technically, you're part phoenix. Part of the legendary creature. Kuku. Part phoenix. Issei widened his eyes as he found himself unable to speak. But the good thing is, you're still not a devil. You're just a phoenix. That's something to be happy about. I'm not too sure about that, Drake. You need to be a partner. Humph. Kuku. See you around. Issei remained quiet as he felt Drake retreat into his subconscious. Trillion yen. Issei stuttered as he came back to reality. Lord Phoenix stopped in his explanation as he noticed Issei's expression. Blinking several times, Issei shook his head and nodded. He looked up at Office and smiled at her, ensuring to her that he was alright. He then looked back to Lord Phoenix and Surzik. That's a lot of money. That is an understatement. Office added in her 2 cents. The devils in the room noticed the sultry yet emotionless tone within Office's speech. Clearing his throat again, Lord Phoenix resumed his explanation. Also, you constantly gain a large surplus of 5 million bloodstones a week, and much more. Issei raised an eyebrow in amazement. The underworld sure is rich. Understatement of the millennia, partner. Oh, you're still here. I thought we were going to talk later. You thought wrong. Here, Issei. Take this. Issei widened his eyes when Surzik suddenly handed him something. It was a card that featured the symbols of the Phoenix clan. The credit card. That's right. The credit card is connected to the money that the Phoenix clan wields, and it works just like the ones the humans use in your world. Turning the card around silently, Issei handed it to Office, who took it and looked at it with a concentrated expression. Smiling at the look on Office's face, Issei brought his attention to Lord Phoenix and the Surzik. So is there anything else? Outside of the Phoenix mansion. Issei crossed his arms as he watched the 15 members of Riser's peerage staring right at him. Next to him was Office, who had her cheeks puffed out like an irritated chipmunk. I do not like the way they are staring at you. Office stated telepathically to Issei. It's alright, Office. You don't need to worry. As he looked at Riser's peerage, he could already point out Shulin, Mira, and Ubeluna. Issei narrowed his eyes a little at Ubeluna. Riser's queen widened her eyes and quickly looked away. Looking at the other members, Issei noticed a girl with blonde hair and dark blue eyes looking at him with an unreadable expression. Issei closed his eyes as he concentrated. Looks like she could be Riser's sister. Apparently from what Riser's father and Serzik said, all of Riser's possessions are bestowed upon me. I just want to say this. The young man opened his eyes and pointed at Riser's peerage. You girls stay here at the Phoenix Mansion. In order to live comfortably, I'll give you enough bloodstones to support yourselves. Holding his hand, a wave of solar flares began to form around Issei and the Ouroboros dragon. His sight focusing on Shulin, Issei nodded to her. You remember what I said? If it's really necessary, only 3 of you can visit my house. Only 3. That's it. I can't have all 15 of you in my house. And with that, Issei disappeared with Office, leaving Riser's peerage to stay at the Phoenix Mansion. The dimensional gap. So have you calmed down now, Office? Yes, I have. Brother. What? No calling me Baka Red anymore. I'm touched and you called me brother. You're still annoying. What the hell did you just? Office, Red, please calm down. Great Red sighed as he peered down at his brother-in-law. Office removed her stare from Great Red and sent her mate an emotionless expression. Issei had convinced Office to travel to the dimensional gap so she and Great Red could reconcile. It seemed to be working so far. Office narrowed her eyes as she looked up at Great Red. I apologize for ruining your fun with my mate. Great Red grinned and nodded. Thanks for the apology, sis. You shall apologize as well. What? Why? Office narrowed her eyes and flew up to Great Red's horn. You stole my Issei when I was not looking. You took him without my permission. Issei is mine. Yeah, but he's my brother-in-law. He is my mate. Office countered. Alright, fine. I'm sorry, alright. Apology is accepted. Issei chuckled a bit as he watched the scene. Well, at least they're getting along. Issei's inner world subconscious. Partner. Long time no see. Have you come here to train? Issei kept quiet as he looked at Drake. When the Red Dragon Emperor had started that conversation with him earlier, it honestly confused Issei. Not today. I just want to talk. Then speak. Earlier today, you said my hellfire transformation made me a phoenix. What exactly did you mean by that? Raising an eyebrow, Drake chuckled and placed the Kusanagi no Tsurugi on his back, crossing his arms in amusement. You have no idea how powerful your hellfire transformation is, do you, partner? No, I don't. Outside of Issei's subconscious. Issei was laying on his couch while meditating and talking to Drake within his subconscious. Next to him was Office, who was sitting next to him. As she watched Issei, her dark grey eyes narrowed in concentration. I sensed the Welsh dragon within my mate. The Ouroboros dragon then set her sights to the middle of the room as she noticed a bright silver circle glowing on the ground. A silhouette suddenly emerged from the circle and cleared, revealing a beautiful and voluptuous woman with curly blonde hair. The woman had her eyes closed with a peaceful look on her face. Narrowing her eyes darkly, Office placed her hand on Issei's forehead. Opening her bright eyes, Gabriel, the most beautiful woman in heaven, widened her eyes in surprise when she noticed one of the strongest beings in existence clinging to Issei. Office? The infinite dragon god. Holding Issei tighter within her grasp, Office set her narrowed eyes directly to Gabriel. Seraph Angel Gabriel. What do you want with Issei? Gabriel remained speechless as she set her sight on the infinite dragon god's grasp on Issei. When did Office and Issei? And what is it doing with him? Office maintained her glare at Gabriel and held onto Issei tighter with her grip. Gabriel widened her eyes further as she noticed Office's appearance. Its appearance changed again. The last time I heard, Office took the form of an elderly man. Then it took the form of a young girl, and now it's in the form of an adult woman, and its body shape seems similar to mine. Suddenly, Office's body began to glow with a blackish aura before a lone snake began to manifest. Gabriel gasped as the snake morphed into the form Office took when she first encountered Issei. Another Office that took the form of its young female state. Office looked at her double and tilted her head. Mimicking her original progenitor, the double tilted her head as well. She then sat on the ground and gazed at her original progenitor. While appearing just like Office, the double's facial expression appeared to be more devoid of emotion. Office lifted her finger up and pointed to her clone. I shall call you Lilith. Tilting her head again, the second Office, rechristened Lilith, set her sights to Gabriel. I am Lilith. Lilith then narrowed her eyes and pointed to the Seraph Angel. And Issei belongs to us. Issei's inner world subconscious. Greg, what did you mean when you said I became a phoenix? I thought when I absorbed Riser's flames, the hellfire transformation was the only result. So naive, partner. Issei raised an eyebrow as Drake shook his head. The Red Dragon Emperor looked up as the sky in his host's inner world began to change. Huffing lightly to himself, Drake turned his attention back to Issei. Partner. The mythical phoenix symbolizes immortality and rebirth. The Phoenix clan possesses abilities that are akin to that of the phoenix itself. Riser Phoenix, because he was a member of the Phoenix clan, was not exempt from inheriting these traits. When you absorbed his flames, you gained the physiology of the legendary phoenix. Issei widened his eyes as he listened to Drake's words. So I'm actually a phoenix now? Not completely. You're part phoenix. Since you possess the physiology of one, you have all the powers and attributes of the legendary creature. That's a lot to take in. Kukukuku. I'd thought you'd feel that way. The two stood in silence, looking around the surroundings of Issei's inner world. Seconds later, Drake smirked at Issei and pointed the Kusanagi no Tsurugi sword in his direction. You've got a lot on your plate, partner. Do you realize that? Before Issei could answer, he looked up just in time to see the sky of his inner world changing once again. It appears that someone is trying to wake you up, partner. Really? I wonder what Office wants. Outside of Issei's subconscious. Slowly opening his eyes, Issei blinked several times before coming back to reality. The first thing he saw was Office clinging on to him. Raising an eyebrow, Issei turned his head to look around his surroundings and widened his eyes in shock. In front of him was a beautiful young woman with curly blonde hair and another Office dressed in a gothic Lolita outfit. Wait, another Office. Issei widened his eyes further at the other Office, who got up from her spot on the ground and walked over to him. Our Issei. The Office clone stated in an almost robotic-like tone. Our Issei thought. Why is there another Office? Lilith, return within me. You shall play with our Issei later. Office ordered. Gazing at Issei with no ounce of emotion within her eyes, Lilith nodded stoically as her body glowed. Converting herself into energy, Lilith retrieved into Office's life force, leaving a surprised Issei and Gabriel. Blinking several times, Issei rubbed his head in confusion. Office? Who was that? That was Lilith. The snake who bit you from 11 years ago. Issei widened his eyes. But I thought that the snake disintegrated as soon as it bit me. No. It returned to me as soon as I marked you. Issei didn't know how to respond. Lilith appeared to be far more emotionless than Office had ever been. As a matter of fact, her eyes appeared to be lighter yet lifeless than Office's own. Her eyes are a lot emptier compared to Office. Shaking his head to clear his thoughts, Issei brought his attention to Gabriel, who was silent the whole time. Issei narrowed his eyes as he sensed Gabriel's energy. Her energy's different from the devil's and fallen angels. So she must be an angel. After confirming the woman's race, Issei looked over to see an irritated Office. Noticing Issei's movement, Gabriel's surprised expression morphed into a warm smile. Issei. Issei raised an eyebrow in confusion at the woman. How do you know my name? He asked as he sat up straight in his seat. Gabriel smiled wider and placed her hand on her chest. I've known a lot about you since you were just a young child, Issei. You have? Haha. Yes, I have. I came to you because I thought we could talk. About what? Issei asked cautiously. The Office kept silent as she listened to the angel's words. Inside she began to feel the tremors of possessiveness once again, but when she remembered Issei's words of reassurance from yesterday, she calmed down. Gabriel smiled wider. I would like to invite you to the realm of heaven. I have a cafe there, and I would appreciate it if you would join me. Are you asking me out on a date? You seem surprised. Well, yeah. I don't think I've ever been asked out by an adult before. It's kind of strange. Gabriel felt her cheeks flush red by Issei's innocent comment, but she smiled and composed herself, waving her hands in defense. Don't think of it as a date. Gabriel said in embarrassment as she chuckled nervously. Issei raised an eyebrow in confusion, and he looked back to Office. Office? Are you alright about this? Issei thought as he spoke telepathically to Office. Office maintained her emotionless stare towards Gabriel, and seconds later, she set her gaze towards Issei. I am alright. I am okay with you going with the Seraph. Issei widened his eyes in surprise at Office's answer. Sitting up from his seat, Issei nodded hesitantly to Gabriel, who smiled and placed her hands to her side. Suddenly, Office's body glowed again, and an aura of black energy manifested, forming into Lilith. Looking up at her progenitor, Lilith tilted her head as she set her side over to Issei, who looked taken aback by the emptiness within the second Office's eyes. Lilith, Office began as she pointed to her mother. You shall follow our Issei and the Seraph. Do you understand? I understand. Lilith replied as she held Issei's hand. Chuckling nervously at the surprised Issei, Gabriel teleported herself and the other two to the realm of heaven, leaving Office to sit in the living room. As Office sat still, a thoughtful expression formed on her face. She had no idea on why she was thinking, what she was pondering on right now, but the thought wouldn't leave her mind. What was on her mind was a subject that involved herself and Great Red. If pushed further, it could possibly involve her mate as well. I shall converse with Baka Red. Office stated as a black aura covered her body, allowing her to transport to another location. Realm of Heaven. Huh. So this is the cafe. Do you like it? Issei didn't know what to say. He had been to a number of cafes in the human world, but neither of them were as clean as the one he was currently in. With his hand clutched within Lilith's grasp, Issei sat down in the booth with Gabriel. Sitting down, Gabriel sent Issei a smile. What do you think? It's a lot cleaner than the ones I've been to. Shiny Lilith said as she looked at her reflection from the table. Giggling at the second office's antics, Gabriel placed her hands on the table and locked eyes with Issei. Issei. The reason I've asked you to come here was because I wanted to thank you. Issei raised an eyebrow. This is the first time I've met you. So why are you thanking me? Issei asked. For preventing another great war. Gabriel answered. This answer piqued Issei's attention. Great war? Gabriel's expression became solemn as she gazed at Issei. Many years ago, the angels, devils, and fallen angels were in constant tension. We, angels, were under the rule of the biblical god, the devils with the 4 great satans, and the fallen angels were in the organization known as Grigori. Issei listened intently to Gabriel's story. Lilith's eyes started to flutter as she was beginning to fall asleep from the story. Gabriel smiled as she saw Lilith lay her head on Issei's shoulder. It seems so empty compared to Office, but I think it loves Issei just the same. Moving her attention back to Issei, Gabriel explained the rest of her story. The biblical god was the original creator and leader of the angels. However, Gabriel paused as she tried to compose herself. He perished in the Great War between the 3 factions. The 4 great satans perished as well, which caused the Great War to finally end. Gabriel's eyes then narrowed as she gave Issei a stern expression. The fallen angel known as Kakabiel wanted to start another great war, Issei, and in doing so, he sent 3 of his followers in order to steal the 3 of the 7 Excaliburs. Issei widened his eyes at the information. Excaliburs. The current leader of the angels, my brother Michael, sent 2 exorcists to retrieve the Excaliburs. After so many days, Kakabiel was supposed to show up to your school and engage in a battle with the devils and Michael's exorcists, but according to what I have heard, Kakabiel never showed up to the battle. Issei remained silent as he felt the situation was somewhat similar to the conversation with Seraphol Leviathan. As he looked back to the sleeping Lilith, Issei was caught off guard when Gabriel suddenly leaned forward to give him a soft kiss on the cheek. Leaning back, Gabriel flashed Issei a warm smile and folded her hands on the table. Issei widened his eyes and rubbed his cheek. What was that kiss for? Dufu? Gabriel giggled as she covered her mouth with her hand. It's like I said, Issei. For preventing another great war. Issei blinked several times and got ready to answer until he felt someone pulling on his clothes. He looked down and saw Lilith pulling on his clothes in order to get his attention. Lilith. Lilith tilted her head as she gazed at her progenitor's mate. I am hungry. Issei turned to look at an amused Gabriel. I'm feeling a little famished myself. What would you like, Lilith-chan? Lilith tilted her head again. I want free. Issei widened his eyes and covered Lilith's mouth before she could say any more. She'll have donuts and cookies. Issei amended the second office. Next day at Kuo Academy. Bali Lucifer stood silently as he floated above the buildings of Kuo Academy. Jutting out from his back was a pair of silver-blue dragon wings. According to Azazel, the school was where his destined rival attended his classes. He could already sense Issei's immense power, and in his own sense of honesty, Bali couldn't help but become interested in fighting him. I sense the Welsh dragon within this boy, Bali. It will be very interesting to meet my rival after all these years. Humph. From what I heard from Azazel, this guy sounds like a worthy opponent. Worthy opponent? That's a nice thing to say. Widening his eyes, Bali turned around to see the wielder of the Red Dragon Emperor himself, standing on top of the school flagpole. Instead of his usual Kuo Academy uniform, Issei was dressed in a black jean jacket, a red t-shirt, black pants, and brown dress shoes. He had his hands in his jean pockets as he looked curiously at Bali. Issei Hyoudou? Bali Lucifer? Bali narrowed his eyes as he sensed another presence. He turned to see Office herself standing on top of the flagpole next to Issei's own. Office? Bali? Office said before she gave him a sly smirk. Greg. It has been a long time. Indeed it has. Albion. Issei and Bali locked stares as they each sensed each other's power. It's a nice school, Hyoudou. How long have you been here? Not too long. Issei said as he shrugged. I assume you know who I am? The Vanishing Dragon. Dryag's mentioned you a couple of times. This is the second time we've seen each other, Hyoudou. How's Kakabiel doing? Azazel sealed him within the deepest part of the underworld. We don't have to worry about him screwing things up. Issei nodded as he tried to ignore the intensity of Drake's aura. Vali kept silent as he looked over to Office, who kept her emotionless stare. I didn't expect Issei Hyoudou to be in contact with you, Office. Office gave Vali another sly smile. Issei belongs to me, Vali. Vali hummed as he looked over to Issei. You seem to attract a lot of people, Issei Hyoudou. What kind of person are you? Issei shrugged again as he balanced his position on the flagpole. To be honest, I don't really know, Vali. I guess my answer I see am who I am, and there's nothing wrong with that. As the days go by, in reality, nothing's changed. You seem a lot calmer than the last time I saw you. Vali noted. Well, in my defense, Vali, Issei began as he crossed his arms. Kakabiel tried to attack me first for no valid reason. Normally, fighting opponents isn't one of my hobbies. That's why I'll only do that. He then locked Vali with a serious gaze. To make sure I protect everyone I care about. Vali didn't show it, but he felt a chill go up his spine at Issei's words. Placing his hands in his pockets, Issei closed his eyes. You said I seemed like a worthy opponent. By that statement, it seems like to me, you're a battle maniac. What can I say? I like to fight strong opponents. Vali said as he smirked. Is that all you want to do in life, Vali? To fight strong opponents? If there is no one strong for me to fight, then I would gladly welcome death. Vali stated. Issei opened his eyes and widened them at the Vanishing Dragon, while Office tilted her head. Issei then crossed his arms and relaxed his stance. That was quite astounding. Vali raised an eyebrow. I've never met anyone with that kind of mindset. Issei stated as he transmitted away. Vali narrowed his eyes as he watched Issei reappear on the school grounds, with Office next to him. Looking up at the Vanishing Dragon, Issei nodded to Vali. In my opinion, one of the ways to get stronger is for you to constantly evolve. Whether you choose to increase your power or the alternative. Intertwining his hands with Office's own, Issei gave Vali another nod. Enjoy each day for what it is, Vali. And with that, Issei and the Ouroboros dragon walked away from the Vanishing Dragon before the former turned around to look back. If you want to find stronger opponents, I would be happy to help you out with that. Just call me. Issei said as he walked away with Office. As he watched Issei walk away from Kuo Academy, Vali narrowed his eyes and crossed his arms. If I didn't know any better, it sounded like the host of Drake was. I know what he was saying, Albion. Vali stated as he interrupted Albion. Walking onto the bridge, Office tilted her head as she gazed at Issei. Issei? Were you offering the Vanishing Dragon a challenge to fight Baka Red? Office asked as she walked with Issei. Actually, I wasn't. It was just something that popped up in my head. Whether he chose to think that I meant Brother Red or myself, it doesn't really bother me. I really don't have any joy in fighting people. The Phoenix Mansion. What is this room? It's the Phoenix Information Center. Issei looked around in awe as he looked around the large room. Surrounding the room were a series of high-tech keyboards. Widening his eyes, Issei walked over and pressed a button, causing the keyboard to emit a holographic-like screen. Issei hummed as he peered at it and in a curious manner. Shulin, who had shown Issei the information center, giggled softly at the young man's curiosity. You look like you've never seen holographic computers before. That's because I haven't. Issei answered. You haven't? Pressing another series of buttons, Issei looked up at the holographic screen to see an assortment of informational websites, a chat screen, and other sites. Yeah, Shulin began. This room is basically exclusive to information brokers. Issei raised an eyebrow as he looked at Shulin. Information brokers? Shulin smiled and nodded in response. Yeah, but usually this room is vacant because none of the members in this house are information brokers. So no one actually uses this room. Is that a fact? Issei asked in interest. Are you interested in becoming one, Issei? An information broker, Issei began as he looked at the holographic screen. He then smiled as he crossed his arms. An information broker does sound interesting. It'll give me something to do, besides school. Shulin smiled as she placed her hands behind her back. It's not going to be easy. You can't just learn something and become a master at it instantaneously. Issei scoffed as he looked over to Shulin. And when has that ever stopped me? Thanks for watching this video. Part 3 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.